Hey guys, Karnath here, and I wanted to give my overall thoughts on Diablo 4, but in the perspective of a casual gamer. With this game, I purposely played this as though I were a casual gamer. I did not rush to grind into level 100. I focused on main story while getting distracted heavily, whether it be, by this case, a treasure goblin or whether it was a side quest or event on the map. I always wanted to make sure I had the most fun, but not in a more grindy type of way. If I got bored of the main quest, I would switch to Renown. I knew Renown was going to be a thing, so I did that. If I wanted to do a dungeon, if I was curious about it, I did that. I saw a stronghold, I loved doing those, so of course I'm going to do that pretty quick. Anyway, here are my thoughts on the game overall from that type of perspective. Before getting into more details, I wanted to give just the overall score, because if that's all you want to know, then cool. But playing this game casually, I would rate this as a 9 out of 10. And yes, I'm not lying, 9 out of 10. Because I'm not sitting here focusing on grinding. I took that equation out. I did what I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted. And that made this game so much more enjoyable than just focusing on trying to get to 100, focusing on how much experience I'm getting, how much per hour, how many legendaries are dropping. I just played the game to play the game, and let me tell you, it was the best time I had in a Diablo game for myself personally. If I had not played that way, I probably would be scoring it a lot different. So my recommendation is, if you're playing this game for the first time, or if you're coming into this game, your first character, play it casually. Don't worry about getting to level 100. Worry about how you're going to have fun. Now, getting into all the details of why I enjoyed this game. The story itself was engaging enough to where I wanted to progress it. So I felt engaged. I wanted to see what happened. It was very visually striking at times, and it felt like it was in the Diablo universe. And when I was going through it, I actually would say by the end of it, I felt pretty average for a story overall if I were to gauge this across everything. And this is just due to the way the story was told and how the characters were. I was actually pretty confused on some of the choices that the characters made, as well as this weird way that they were trying to add a complex layer to it. And it actually became something that took away from the overall story flow. I kept wondering to myself, why is this party doing this at this particular time? Or is there even a reason for this to be happening this way? So, overall, the actual story itself kind of had this weird, confusing tone that it didn't need. And if they had made it a little bit more simplistic, it would have felt better as a story. But playing the story and getting to do all these bosses and everything, the gameplay part of all that stuff was amazing. I loved it. I enjoyed it. The boss fights were great. Even if some of them were where I didn't do enough damage, were a little bit more difficult for me because I didn't have the gear. I didn't have the best skills. Those were a ton of fun. And I would gladly go through the story if I were to get rewarded somehow and play those boss fights. And I wish I could play those boss fights outside the story. But overall, the story was engaging enough to keep going and made me want to focus on it a lot more. And it became one of my main focuses in the beginning. After that, it was definitely the renown system. So going from the story to the next part of the puzzle was the renown for me. I broke this up into sections, and that made it feel really good. So I did Fractured Peak. Okay, I'm going to get all the altars of Lilith. Oh, there's a side quest here. Sure, I'll get distracted by that on my way to the next altar. And kind of grouping them in the area rather than doing all altars for the entire map. Doing this for the entire map. Felt really good. It was felt nice because I would say, okay, I'm tired of finding altars. Well, just do a dungeon real quick, do a side quest real quick, and that was took a break from that, and I go jump right back in. The next aspect I would like to talk about would be the skills in Paragon board. As I was leveling up, I felt the skill tree was amazing. It wasn't overly complicated, and while there are some skills I'd say definitely need tweaking because it's the initial release, and definitely some passives that need to be tweaked. The skill tree itself, I felt was at the perfect level, simple enough, yet in like it has just enough depth to go, okay, this is kind of cool, and I can refine my skills so I can play around with it a bit. The obvious complaint is in later levels, which it costs tons of gold just to respec, which it just does not feel good to do that. And it does not look fun because I'm only 72. I haven't gotten to the point where it costs millions just to respec. So that is a definite complaint, but I haven't reached that part yet. And as far as the Paragon board, when I unlocked it, it was a lot. And granted, it seems simple where you just click, 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 and there you go. You get your stats and you power up this way. I enjoyed the fact that there was enough depth to it that it was more complicated than it seems. I could put a glyph here, but how many stats do I have in that area that could actually empower that glyph? Okay, and are there legendary nodes that are actually worth it for the build I want to try to do? Maybe there's not. Maybe there's only one I could actually use. Then the aspect of attaching a boards and rotating them. You have rare nodes and magic nodes and all this stuff. I felt like that was what was needed for the end game, and I truly love the Paragon board. And it feels like not everybody's is going to be the same because of the way your stats are probably going to line up, and maybe you need 5 stats here, 5 stats there, and someone else didn't need those stats in order to power up. So overall, I'm very impressed with the Paragon board. The next part I want to talk about is progressing after the story, which would be World Tier 3, getting into new things like Helltide Zones and Nightmare Dungeons, and how it kind of progresses through that in that kind of casual perspective. By the time I got to World Tier 3, I had not finished Renown at all, and I felt like I had a ton to do as soon as I reached it. And that it felt great. I felt like, okay, World Tier 3 is where I kind of hone in on getting those extra points, Paragon points for my board. I actually level up a bit to get used to the build I have. I journey around and try out these Helltide zones to get more of the materials I need for later in the game. And as soon as I got bored with something as far as farming renown, jumping into a Helltide zone in particular just felt great, like a great break. Okay, let me just wander around and pick up this stuff. And even though I wasn't the most efficient starting off, I just wandered around, picked up some crystals, opened some chests to get the Forgotten Souls, and moved on. I did a few chests and moved on. It felt great to do that because it broke up the grind for renown a lot. Afterwards, getting into tier 4 stuff, I changed my method to focus on those chests of mysteries that pop up. So World Tier 3 is where I felt like I had a lot more fun because I felt my build coming together. It felt good to do certain types of damage and kind of adjusting if I needed to, getting the items I needed for this build, and going through and just wandering around and having a great time. I felt like this was where I enjoyed it a lot because I had those Helltide zones popping up and everything. And I started doing Nightmare Dungeons to get those sigils, and that was a great break from things. In fact, not focusing on grinding all these dungeons early on felt like a reward for me in tier 3 because I would pop a Nightmare Dungeon that I had never done this dungeon before. Well, guess what? I get the reward of the aspect as well. And because I did it that way, it actually felt even better to do a Nightmare Dungeon to start leveling up my glyphs and get that aspect I was missing. So playing this casually even in tier 3 was amazing. I felt like this is where I got my most fun out of and had a time of my life. So jumping to where I'm pretty much at right now is tier 4, Torment. And the transition into that was good, and I only focused on that when I was around 68 to 69 is when I jumped into world tier 4 fully, and it's fun and it gives that extra difficulty curve that is nice. But now, since I'm out of things to do, as far as I have some dungeons to run that I could get some more aspects, but I don't really need them, and I don't have any renown to get, this is when it starts to feel more of a grind in the casual sense. And you start to feel what others have been feeling as far as these dungeons don't give great experience and they aren't the best. When I hop in on my on a very casual session of say I do a little bit of Helltide, do dungeon, maybe two, and I'm done for the day. I may not even get a level, and that doesn't feel too great. That didn't feel good to me at all. Sometimes I would get 2 Paragon points in a day, and I would say that's it, and that didn't feel too great. So when you reach Torment, when you reach World Tier 4 casually, that's when it starts to go, oh, here's the grind, and here's where it slows down, and where a lot of the valid complaints are coming in and starts hitting the casual gamer. And this made me realize, okay, I'm going to have to put my head down and grind. Since I hadn't been grinding this entire time and hadn't been focusing, I'm actually okay with that. Others may not be because the grind is slow and it can get a bit repetitive. But I was okay. I'm okay with switching over to grinding after all the fun I had experienced in World Tier 3, and I'll gladly do it for my first character for level 100. So that's the kind of breakdown I would think. As a casual gamer, you'll probably enjoy everything up until World Tier 4. You might be, this kind of doesn't feel as good, but it's still fun, but the grind doesn't feel so good. And the last thing I want to talk about is creating alternate characters. As someone who plays casually, I enjoy experiencing other characters other than just playing Sorcerer all the time. Now, when creating a new character, it can be fun at first, and especially, again, since you didn't grind out the dungeons, you actually have dungeons you can do that you will still get aspects for. And being able to go into Fractured Peaks and going, oh, I haven't done this dungeon as my main character. Let me do this as my alternate character. You actually feel like you're progressing something, even though it's still another dungeon. And that felt pretty good. And I didn't feel like, okay, yeah, this is a grind. It's actually, oh, okay, well, now I can focus on the aspects for this class, or I can focus on these dungeons because I didn't grind them out as my main character, and those sort of things. And that's what made the experience of leveling the alternate character much, much better. However, it's a lot more of a grind because you don't have a lot of the systems that you worked with when you were leveling up your first character. You already know what you're kind of getting into. But I would say the experience of doing something new, of when I was playing Rogue, was my second character I played as. I currently have it at 42. I find it very engaging up until the point where I stopped getting new skills. And at that point, I felt like, I'm back to this grind. And it made me kind of miss the fact that I had the story to do and renown to do and something else that would push me forward as I was progressing. So for alternate characters, it's great to experience. And when I got to around level 30-ish or so, I start to feel the grind again. I would still recommend creating alternate characters to get an idea of like what class does stun damage better, which class does vulnerability damage better. How do classes work? How do those builds work? What skills do they have? So that when you get into a party, you know for a fact, okay, well, this rogue, I see they're going to probably apply vulnerability a lot because they got a lot more skills geared toward that. Maybe as a sorcerer, I should focus on switching it up if I party with this rogue a lot more to stuns. Maybe I need to focus on stuns while they focus on vulnerability. And now we're dipping in both pools, and it's going to be a lot better, and you're going to stagger the boss more, etc. And it could be this same thing with sorcerer, like, oh, this sorcerer is producing vulnerability damage. Maybe I focus on poison damage as a rogue, but if you're constantly partnering with someone. So leveling the alternate characters, you do get more insight into how things kind of pan out for other classes. I have not gotten into the Paragon boards for the other classes, so I can't really comment on that aspect because sadly the grind was getting to me on another character going, I'm not even in Torment 3. I'm not doing this. It's like I can get there, but I still haven't even grinded my first character to 100. Is it going to be worth it to keep going with this alternate character, or should I actually go and do 100? Honestly, it's up to you, right? As a casual gamer, I just play what's fun. Today I feel like playing rogue. Tomorrow I feel like playing druid. Maybe the day after I go back to my main. And even though I don't have a single character 100, I'm still having fun because I can get a varied sense of the build and I can play different play styles at any time. And there you go. There's all my experience as playing this game casually. And as you can see, I've had a ton of fun with it, and I'm to the point where it's endgame. And I'll probably make another video outlining, my torment life and seeing if the grind really does push that rating back from 9 out of 10 to something else. For right now, I'm still enjoying the game, even though there's a grind fest ahead of me, because I love Diablo games. Now, if you are just here because you want to try out Diablo 4, I would say at the point where you're at, where I'm at, where I have, 5 characters, I've played each of the classes, and I have one at level 72. I've experienced a bit of Torment 4, and you're not going to get too much else new. I would say you could just break off right now. Maybe see if there's an update later on. See how these roll out further down the line and see if the seasons are something you're interested in, But I would say at least give one character up to around 70. And if you want to try out the other characters, get them to at least level 30. That will give you an idea, at least some sort of idea of how these kind of play. While uniques and everything do change a lot and have endgame builds, I don't think you're going to be missing out a huge amount of content if you just stop there and say, I'm done. I've played the game. I've gotten what I've gotten out of it. I'm going to take a break until they update all this stuff. So hopefully this has been helpful. And if you enjoyed this, awesome. And if not, I apologize. You can just let me know, like, if what I could do to do this better. And thanks. See you next time.